If you're on this call, you're probably not in the 50% of people that don't believe that there are any LGBT workers in their organisations, but you don't need me to tell you that those 50% of people are wrong, and that shows that we still need to raise awareness. The Human Rights Campaign Foundation statistics also show that 25% of LGBTQ workers who are knocked out at work feel distracted from their work. 28% of them hide their personal life. 17% feel exhausted from spending time and energy hiding their gender identity. And 31% feel unhappy or depressed at work as a result. How can we expect our people to do great work for us at Impellam and do their best work and be engaged if they're not able to bring their whole selves and be their true selves at work? Our session today is in two parts. First, Russell Norton will deliver a keynote speech on the impact of changes in society and how we can make the workplace a safer space for our LGBTQ+ community. In the second part of our panel, three of our Impellam colleagues from across the globe, we have one from UK, one from US, and one from Asia Pac, will discuss LGBTQ inclusion at Impellam, and they're going to talk to us about how we can become better allies to our LGBTQ+ colleagues. Over the past few weeks, many of our colleagues have been making short videos to talk about what Pride Month means for them. We did share those videos just a few days ago on Workplace, so please do make sure you go and check them out. I didn't do my video because I knew I was hosting the panel today, and I wanted to use the opportunity to tell you what Pride Month means to me. For me, Pride is a high-profile reminder that the LGBTQIA+ community didn't always have equality, and we must always seek to protect and expand upon those rights. Pride allows us to amplify our voices and embrace our allies in the fight for equality for all members of our community. I'm thinking back to when Julia asked me to move to the USA in 2019. It goes without saying, it was important to me that I could bring my wife with me. The first thing I had to do was Google to check whether or not gay marriage was even legal in Georgia. I know that might sound crazy, especially today. It was actually only legalized in Georgia 4 years before that, in 2015. So less than 7 years ago, I couldn't have married my partner. We wouldn't have been able to get a joint visa to come over here to the US. We didn't have next of kin rights to see each other in hospital, and we wouldn't have been able to adopt children if that had been our path. Thankfully, over the years, LGBTQ rights have progressed in all of our core Impellam territories, but that isn't the case everywhere, and continued progress isn't guaranteed. We recorded the panel videos last week, and since then, there's been some fairly significant political events in the US, and one of those was the overturning of Roe versus Wade last Friday, and that has definitely set alarm bells ringing for me and for the LGBTQ+ community. And I wonder if this is just the beginning of legislative change in the US. Some of you may know this already and some may not, but along with the Supreme Court's ruling on Friday to overturn Roe versus Wade, one of the judges, Justice Thomas, said the court should also reconsider previous rulings that protected access to contraception, same-sex relationships, and same-sex marriage, even going as far as saying that the Supreme Court has a duty to correct the error established in those precedents. You can understand why that kind of rhetoric makes our community really anxious. I'm going to switch over to the panel, to the video in a second, but first, just introduce you to Russell. Russell Norton is the head of client experience for a firm called Scarlettabbott. They're an employee engagement consultancy who help organizations like us to build more inclusive cultures. Russell's going to talk to us about the impact of changes in society and how we make the workplace safer for our LGBTQ+ community. And straight after Russell's video, we'll also go into the pre-recorded panel.
Hi there, it's great to talk to you today. My name is Russell Norton and my pronouns are he, him. My official job title is Director of Client Experience at Scarlettabbott, Europe's leading employee engagement consultancy. But a huge part of my job is being our lead D&I engagement consultant. That means I work with large organisations to help them communicate about diversity, inclusion, belonging and equity. My aim is to make this a topic that everyone can engage with, because in so many of my clients' worlds, D&I is owned by a team or by a group of networks and therefore is perceived as being for someone else, not for everyone. But I believe good diversity and inclusion work is for everyone. The very best solutions and the greatest work invites more people in and doesn't exclude anyone. A great, though small, example is how I stated my pronouns at the beginning of this piece. It's a simple act that goes some way to making the space feel safer for anyone whose identity doesn't conform to the binary, but it's also an act that doesn't exclude anyone. There's nobody who now can't participate in the rest of this conversation. And the reason that I'm so passionate about all of this is due to my own identity as a gay man. And in the past, I've experienced homophobia and suffered from bullying. But I do also recognise that I have it far easier than most. My own approach starts with understanding my own privilege. After all, I'm a white, able-bodied, cisgender, educated man, and I live in the UK. And all of these characteristics offer me privilege in today's society. So what I try to do is spend that privilege being an active ally to the minority and marginalised communities within the organisations I work with. We're here today to talk about that, the experience of the LGBTQ+ community, and how that experience has changed in recent years. So I guess the easiest place to start is from my own perspective here in the UK. And things undeniably have come a long, long way. We recently celebrated the 50th anniversary of Pride in the UK, and a leading LGBTQ+ rights charity that you might have heard of, Stonewall, released some stats about perceptions here. And the UK public is more likely to feel positive towards the LGBT community. 35% said they feel respect and 28% feel admiration. And less than 10% report feelings of disgust, and less than 5% report feelings of fear or resentment. So things are getting better. People are feeling warmer towards the LGBTQ+ community. That said, when asked about pity, 7% said that they feel pity for lesbian, gay and bi people, and 15% said they feel pity for trans people. Now, there's two sides to the story here. Are they saying they feel pity for trans people because of their situation? Or are they saying that they feel pity because of the transphobia and the discrimination that they face? The data doesn't go into that, but it's interesting that pity is felt much more strongly towards the trans community. It has to be said though, it's not all positive. And 2/3 of LGBTQ+ people have experienced anti-LGBT+ violence or abuse, and only 1 in 8 of those people said that they felt comfortable going to the police. And it's worse for people who aren't white. So 1/3 of LGBT people who are Black, Asian or another minority ethnicity, those people have experienced a hate crime within the last year. That's 34%. And that's compared to 20% for white LGBT people. And 2 in 5 trans people, that's 41%, have experienced a hate crime or incident because of their gender identity. And that's out in wider society. So when you bring that into work, the stats tell another story. So more than 1/3 of LGBT staff, that's 35%, have hidden their sexual orientation at work for fear of discrimination. And around 1/5 have been the target of negative comments or conduct from work colleagues because they're LGBT. Almost 40% of bi people aren't out to anyone at work about their sexual orientation, and that's compared to 7% of gay men and 4% of lesbians. And 1/4 of trans people aren't open with anyone at work about being trans. And if I look out to the US, it has to be said that the picture is, wow, sadly even less positive. June 12th, very recently, we saw the 6-year anniversary of the mass shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, which was predominantly aimed towards the gay community and the Latinx community in particular. This year, there have been nearly 240 anti-LGBTQ+ bills posted by the government, most of those targeting trans people. There's the Don't Say Gay bills in Florida and Texas, and these are trying to prevent teachers educating school children about different sexual orientations and gender identities. And at least 57 trans or gender non-conforming people were violently killed last year. It's shocking statistics, really. And when you zoom out even further, there are still 70 countries around the world that criminalise same-sex relationships, and the death penalty for same-sex relationships is either allowed or evidence of its existence occurs in 11 of those countries. So that fear of criminalisation or even death for LGBTQ+ people is shocking, and it's out there. But I guess my overarching emotion right now, I suppose, is hope. I do think that things are on the right journey and getting better. What I've seen is greater awareness and greater discourse. I think channels like TikTok, channels like Twitter are giving a voice to those people who are experiencing this discrimination, and that voice is spreading and being shared, and people are joining that fight for equality. I also think our media is slowly pushing forward. Over here in the UK, we had a fantastic show recently called Heartstopper, which is just a beautiful story about two young lads falling in love and their first relationship being a same-sex relationship. And the storyline wasn't centred on homophobia or discrimination necessarily, it was purely a love story. And that certainly felt revolutionary to me. That would be unheard of 20 years ago when I was growing up. And even from my own experience, this weekend at Pride here in York, wandering around, what was fantastic was to see the sheer range of people of all ages feeling so much more comfortable to express themselves. And I would say particularly with their gender identity, I'd say gender fluidity really is becoming more and more the norm, and non-heterosexual relationships certainly becoming much more accepted at events like Pride. Whereas perhaps even 5-10 years ago, they were predominantly for the gay community and male-male, female-female relationships only. So it is hopeful, but it's hopeful because we have to keep listening to these stories of discrimination, of hate crimes, of homophobia, of biphobia, of lesbophobia, of transphobia. We have to keep listening to these and empathising and not being a passive observer, being an active ally, using our voices, using our power, using our privilege, using whatever we have to say, that's not okay. That person is just being who they are or loving who they love. And really there's nothing wrong with that. So why should we ever try to institutionalize the discrimination against them or formalize that discrimination against them? Why would we do that? So I'm really excited about the conversation today. You'll see me shortly speaking to our panelists today. I hope you found the stats that I've shared interesting. I hope you share the same hope that I have. And I'm really looking forward to continuing this conversation at Impellam. So, hi folks. Thanks for joining us. My name is Russ, as I'm sure you've just seen. I'm here today to facilitate this conversation with some fantastic guests, and I'm going to start off by asking each of our guests today to introduce themselves. And I would love to hear from each of you your name, your role at Impellam, and also why is this important to you? Why are you excited to be here as part of this conversation today? And Farren, I'd love it if you could go first.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. My name is Farren Congress. I am an account manager for Lorian, the specialty markets group for Salesforce. I'm extremely excited to be a part of this conversation. My pronouns are she, her. I am extremely excited to be a part of this conversation because I think it's important, especially in the workplace, for people to feel seen, valued, and supported. And that is a huge stride that I feel like we've made in the community, um, in corporations. It was a huge reason why I picked Lorian and Impellam Group as a company, just for reasons like this, and talking to people who work here and have worked here, and the leadership that Claire has set, the example that she set, with supporting her employees of all different types, especially in the LGBT community. I was like, of course I want to be part of that team, so I'm excited to be a part of this conversation.
Fantastic, thank you. And then over to the UK, Mick.
Hi, thanks very much. Thanks very much for passing over, Farren. So I'm Mick Whitley. I am the commercial director for the UK and Ireland for MGG, been with the organisation coming up to 11 years. So my pronouns, me, him. I am really excited about this, and I reflecting on something you said in your intro, Russ, which was around we've come such a long way, the community, and just even the addition of the initials that we've added over the last few years have just been fantastic to me. And for me, I'm very fortunate in the position that I am, and I recognize that. I've got a loving husband, family, and friends who support me. But it hasn't always been the case. And those troublesome teenage years and early 20 years, with some not particularly nice experiences, I remember them very well. And I want to be part of this group because I want to make sure, if I possibly can, that some of those experiences that I experienced, inside and outside of work, the younger generation from our community don't have the same challenges. So that's why I'm here.
Fab, thanks, Mick. And all the way down under to Andrew.
Hi, thanks, Russ. Hello everyone. My name's Andrew Turner, and I'm Director of Specialist Staffing for APAC, and I've been with Impellam for about 3 and a bit years now. And time flies when you're having fun, is what they say. My pronouns are he, him. I think why did I want to be part of the panel discussion? Because I think as an out gay man and in a leadership role, I have a responsibility around creating culture in my environment and in my teams and across the wider business. And I think a really important part of Pride Month is about visibility and showing our colleagues and our suppliers and our co-workers that it's okay to be who you want to be, that we have a culture of belonging here at Impellam, that you're valued, and that we'll support you to be a success no matter who you are or what your background is. And it's really simple. I think that's probably the simplest way to describe it from my perspective. And it's the first one of these that I think we've done in this format. So to be part of hopefully kicking off an agenda with Farren and Mick is really, really great. So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, folks. It's fab to be together today. So I guess I want to start off with LGBTQ plus inclusion at Impellam. If you could summarize it and give a bit of a review of how you feel you're excelling and where you think there's more progress to be made. Mick, would you kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it's been a very positive experience being part of the LGBTQ plus community. However, I am also very aware that I started in a senior leadership position when I joined the organization. So I think that with that comes, I guess, I don't know if this is the right word, but some protection, perhaps. I've been extremely well supported by the leadership at the organization from day one. I have never felt like I've needed to hide any details about myself. When my husband and I got married 9 years ago, it was a celebration, just like it would have been a celebration with any other marriage, and that was really fantastic. And I think it goes back to one of my earlier comments. For me, I'm really clear about what my journey has been. But I know that if I perhaps joined the organization 20 years ago, or maybe a little bit longer, I wasn't in the same place about accepting who I was and the journey that I was going through. So that's more than perhaps for us, what is the experience like? I guess what I'm calling out is that I don't necessarily know what that experience is like for someone new joining us. But this panel, like Andrew said, should be the start or not necessarily the start, but a continuation of the openness of our organization, because there is no barrier within this group. I mean, the people on this panel are clearly showing that. So for me, really positive, but definitely need to make sure that that experience is shared for every employee.
I love that. I love that recognition that your truth is not everyone's truth. And I think that's a really powerful way to start this conversation about diversity and inclusion and privilege and how we choose to spend that privilege. Farren, would you share your kind of perspectives on how you feel LGBTQ plus inclusion is going at Impellam?
My experience has been really good. I did not come in like Mick did as senior leadership, but I still feel supported. For example, the Pride event that we just did here in Dallas, I think was amazing. Everyone came together. It was so much fun. I'm a bisexual woman, and so that's not something that I would ever. This is actually the first company that I've ever shared that with my coworkers or colleagues, because I didn't feel like, I am a Black woman in corporate America. There's all of these other things that you have to already kind of navigate. And I just kind of kept my personal side to myself. And this is the first place that I feel I can be my full, authentic self, and feel supported in that way. I think one way that we it's a twofold, because I think that we're doing a really great job with allyship. But I also think that we could challenge, each other to be better at it and to support more. I think with the BRG groups, all of them are phenomenal, but I just challenge people who this is not something that you identify as, or this is not something that you have an experience with. But if you don't know, join the group, educate yourself. It's right there. Like, meet people, have those experiences. We had the Pride event. I really want to quickly shout out Anderson and Peter. We had the Pride event. I brought one of my dearest friends with me, who his son is actually my godson. And about a year ago, his son came out to me as bisexual. And then 6 months ago, he came out to his parents, who were really religious, as bisexual. And they'd been struggling with it for a while. I invited them to the Pride event because we could do a +1. And Chris was like, you know what? I want to go. I want to learn. I want to educate myself so I can be a better friend to you, support my son. And he was a little bit more reserved, but seeing Anderson, seeing Peter there, cisgender heterosexual men who are just there as allies to also learn, support, really helped him open up. It really helped him open up to receive information, to just embrace everyone for what, because for those Pride events, they are so much fun. Everybody's just there being themselves, and so it was just a really good experience. So that's what I want to challenge Impellam Group to do is use your privilege that you have to educate yourself and to support your colleagues and the people in your life, so that we can make the next generation, like Mick said, not have to go through what we've experienced.
Of that. Thanks, Farren. I think that visibility is such an interesting aspect of all of this, because our sexual orientation is to some extent a hidden dimension of our diversity. And Farren, it's really fascinating to hear your perspective as a Black woman. You're already questioning what's the motivation behind the situation that I'm experiencing right now, and do I really want to throw bisexuality, my sexual orientation, into the mix? So I guess I'd love to pick up with you perhaps later in the conversation about that. When do you choose to be visible, and when perhaps might you choose to keep that bit invisible? Andrew, I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I think Mick and Farren have probably said what there needs to be said on the topic. I think my own personal experience has been one of inclusion with Impellam, and I've been fortunate enough to work in the UK and now over in the Asia Pacific region, which is very similar but also very different in terms of work-life culture and environment. But I wouldn't say that I've been any less supported. If anything, I have privilege, though. I'm in a senior leadership role, like Mick, similar to Mick, and that comes with privilege and responsibility around how I support our community and how I'm seen as an ambassador and a role model within our organisation and the culture that we build, not just around Pride, but other areas of around diversity and inclusion. Where would I rate Impellam? I'd say we're a B at the moment, and this is and that's not meant to be disrespectful to the work that the groups are doing, but we're just really starting to pull how we work together in these areas and the support groups that are being formed within each region. So I'm really confident about our future and how we have visibility across a range of issues. But there's a few steps to go, and I have a bit of responsibility. Ahead of the call, ahead of the recording, we're talking about the differences in region, and for us, our Pride Month is February, March, because that's our summer, and that's when the traditional Mardi Gras and Pride events take place. So Pride Month, whilst it's great for the Northern Hemisphere, really has a lower profile in Asia Pacific at the moment. So we've got to think about and take responsibility for what we're going to do to really set the bar for 2023, and really my region's is first off the starting blocks for next year. But I think The intention's good within our organisation. There is a real culture of support, I believe. I'd be genuinely disappointed if that wasn't the case. I think there's always learning in education, as Farren said earlier in the conversation. But I feel we're in a good place, and I'm pretty proud to work for Impellam, irrespective of what we're doing around Pride. I feel like we're in a good organisation that's supportive of colleagues, and I think if I'd ever had to question hiding my sexuality, I probably wouldn't be here. And I think that says quite a lot about the organisation. But there's more we can do. But I'm really pleased that I'm part of the journey and that we're all part of the journey. And yeah, let's see what the future holds.
That's fab. Thanks, Andrew. So I guess I'd love you to cast your minds to a new starter joining today. Say it's my first day here at Impellam, and I would love you to tell me, it's a quick fire question, this one, tell me the one thing that makes my experience at Impellam as a gay man, tell me the one thing that you think is just brilliant and stand out and that I should watch out for. I'm going to go to Mick first on that one.
The one thing, there's lots of things, so I need to, thanks for putting me first. That's good. I'll fill in a bit of time while I think of the one clear thing. Really, for me, I think it's got to be about from day one, really, the welcome and how people are inducted into the organization. So when we're thinking about people arriving, we will have gone through a process to onboard people into the organization, but we won't know all of their personal details. We won't know that, and that's absolutely fine. So for me, it's day one. So when the induction starts, we're talking about diversity as one of the key topics. So start with that. Talk about what it means to feel included. Share some of these personal stories, so that then the people that are joining our organizations start with the right frame of mind. So I think that's absolutely there, that they are welcome, that we will do everything to support them, and we will not stand by, not just as this group of people, but as an organization, we will not stand by and allow behavior which is inappropriate to happen in the workplace. Because I think that there's one thing to have these groups, but actually we've got to make a stand about that. And I think that's really, really key. And the second thing for me there, Russ, which may be going a little bit off topic, is actually while we're doing the induction bit, is also making sure that people who've been in this organisation are also have access to the same types of information that we're talking about today, and they see it, because there'll be people who joined longer than me, 11 years ago, who haven't had the benefit of this same level of visibility, and we need to make sure that we're being really open, and that it is not just for today. This is a constant thing as we go through the organization. Again, we talked about this earlier. It's fantastic celebration, but actually it's really important that it's in November, December, because that could be a difficult time in that employee's life. And so actually let's make sure that it's not just today, that it continues. That's really what I would like people to expect, and for us to deliver to them as employees when they start with us.
Great. Andrew, can I turn to you next?
After my joke earlier about taking Teams off mute, I couldn't get Teams to unmute there. So what would I say? I think what you would see if you walked through our doors is a diverse environment where you can be yourself. So we've broken down some barriers and silos, even basically around the dress code, which sound really basic, but we've got a pretty relaxed feel. It's very probably typically Australian in that respect, that it is a bit more of a chilled environment. But what we've managed to create, we brought the region together 2 years ago, which were quite disparate businesses, and that's brought together new cultures. And I think genuinely people would say that they can be themselves here, irrespective of characteristics or gender or race or religious belief. I feel like we've created a really nice environment where people can be themselves and can belong. And I think that that gets the most out of people, really. And as Mick says, it starts with induction, but it starts before that. Does this person fit with, can that person's experiences and knowledge contribute to our success, irrespective of their background? And then their induction is about how do we support them to succeed. And I feel like we've really started to create really solid foundations here around that. And I love coming to work here in our office in Sydney. I'm really proud of what we've created. I mentioned that earlier, and I think that would be the thing that struck me first is a modern, diverse workplace where you can be your absolute self, and we'll support you and celebrate you for that. So that would be my take on that.
Sounds fab. Sounds fab. And Farren, any other builds on that?
I'm like, how do I follow that? That was great. I absolutely agree. Day one, I think honestly it starts in the interview. For me personally, it started in the interview process. Speaking with Chris McKinney, Danny Cohen, Sheldon Brand, like the entire process, every step, diversity of thought, diversity of characteristics, it was huge in the conversation. And it made me feel like this is a place, like Andrew said, that I can be my authentic self and that they can see straight through, all of the characteristics and all of the, whatever else, what other things people may see as barriers, they can see through that and see the potential that I have and what I can bring to the company and how they can help me to be my best self. And I think that is one of the things that gets you excited for day one. And so day one, you're coming in, you already know, like, this is a place where I can just be me and like they, accept me for who I am. So that allows me to be the best version of myself. That allows me to push myself to the next step. And, you know, there is work to do in leadership with visibility and diversity and things like that. But we're getting there and, we're growing and we're ever evolving. So yeah, that's my part of that. Andrew had and Mick said everything else that needed to be said.
No, that's fantastic. That's really, really interesting. Thanks, team. I think what I love is hearing you folks speak. It sounds very authentic. There are a lot of organizations out there that plaster, lovely posters with one of every type of person on them and go, everyone's welcome here. And then you turn up and it's not like that at all, or the culture's really weird and nobody wants to stand out or be different. What I'm hearing is that it's very real to the people and it's very much about the one-to-one conversations that you have, which is fantastic, and that's something to be really proud of and something to protect. So I guess I'm curious, let's pick back up on that visibility and role models and being seen. Why do you think it's important to have visible role models, and why do you think it's relevant to be a visible role model, certainly at a senior level, but also just on a day-to-day basis? I guess my own experience is that sometimes as a gay man, I don't want to reveal that part of myself because it's like I'm not a gay consultant. I'm a consultant and I help create great communications. Like my sexual orientation in theory has got nothing to do with that. But at the same time, I know that if there's someone who's struggling with their sexual orientation or gender identity, maybe that makes a safer space. So I guess, do you folks have any kind of additional perspectives of why that visible role model and making this a topic of conversation on a more regular basis is so important? Farren, would you mind if I came to you first on that one?
Absolutely. I believe it was Andre Lloyd that said, you can't be what you can't see. And so we've all had different experiences, and our experiences kind of have shaped us to, like you said, Russ, I'm not a gay consultant. I'm just a consultant. Um, Sometimes there is someone that needs to see, hey, there's a really successful gay consultant. There's an extremely successful gay man in leadership at this company. Sometimes it does need to be seen. And a lot of times we have reserved it because of our past experiences, because of the, hate that sometimes we receive, sometimes it's prevented us from moving forward or upward in different companies in different situations, and sometimes you just want to keep certain parts to yourself. I love quotes. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna throw another quote out there. My Angelou said, you know, do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, do better. And so we did the best we could. I mean, we were all different, age groups, but that youth to like coming out and then accepting myself and that whole period that we all share, it was rough, and we did the best we could with what we had. And so now that we know better, we have to be an example so that those who are coming behind us don't have to go through that. Where I feel like this is a marathon. It's a very long marathon that nobody in my generation, your generation, or any of our generations is going to finish. But it's up to us to kind of grab the baton, take our little lap that we're supposed to, and then pass the baton on. And if our lap is to just say, hey, I'm visibly here, I'm a bisexual woman in sales, I am a gay consultant, I am a gay man in leadership, if that's my part of this race, so that the next generation or the next person coming behind me can just kind of full blast take off, then I'm willing to do that and be visible and have the courage to step out on faith. And I'm glad that we are in a place and in an environment like Impellam Group where we can do that and be comfortable in doing that.
I mean, it's going to be hard to follow that, chaps. But Andrew, do you have any additional thoughts?
I've got two thoughts. One is that I can't add anything better than what Farren just said there. And I love the analogy about it being a marathon and that we play our part. And two, I'm going to come back to you for quotes. I love that one. You can't be what you can't see. So I think I'm going to steal that one, Farren, but credit will be given appropriately. In seriousness, I'd agree, and I'd boil it down to a comment that I made earlier, and the comments that Farren and Mick have made during the course of the discussion. We have a responsibility as humans first and foremost, and to be kind to ourselves and to others, and to lead with empathy, and to demonstrate the art of what's possible, and that there isn't a barrier that you can't overcome. And 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 I don't think I can add much more to it, really. I think I inherently believe that I have a responsibility that to help create that culture. And also, if people aren't on board or dragging that culture down or behaving in ways, I have a responsibility to take action and help make sure that things don't go unchecked at the same time. And I think Farren put it beautifully, and I'm just trying to think of a way to fluff some time now. So I'm going to stop there and hand over to Mick, the poor person who has got the last word on this, I think. So,
Mick, you have full permission to say there is nothing else we can possibly add. But if you do want to add something, by all means, go ahead.
Do you know, I mean, completely agree with everything that's been said. I was just thinking there about an example around what visibility means, and how, when you're not visible, how that can feel. And one of the experiences that I've had is, I've got a wedding ring, is I've been asked very frequently the first time I've met someone, maybe even in a meeting, all right, what does your wife do? There's an assumption made there. And so my feeling about visibility is that actually, you know, I personally don't have a challenge pushing back, but we've talked about, or not pushing back, but being who I am. We talked about that earlier on. But I would really not want anyone else in this organization to be in that situation where they're sat there, because I'm kind of looking at my colleagues here on, and we've probably been there, where you're thinking, oh, is now the time? Do I actually have to speak up in front of this whole room? And I don't want anyone to be in that situation. So for me, put my foot forward, say who I am, be proud of who I am, and be proud of my colleagues, whatever their background is. But that's probably the only thing I could add to that, really. That's just a personal thing for me.
on that though, Mick, I quite like it, because I'm also married, that when people ask what did my wife do or what have you, I quite like saying my husband. And I say it in jest, but I think it's really important as well that we don't. If it's not always comfortable, and it might not always be appropriate. I think sometimes we're not always truthful to ourselves, depending on the situation. But that's okay. But where it's appropriate, I still sometimes do get a giggle out of pushing back. So
It's so true. Like, and it's so funny because I say this all the time. We're not a monolith. Like, I am a bisexual woman. I'm currently in a relationship with a cishet man, and people are like so confused at times. But I'm like, that's the education part of it. Like, let me educate you. That is a part of my identity. That is who I am. And this relationship doesn't define who I am. I define who I am. And the relationship that I was in before does not define who I am. I define who I am. So I completely understand when it comes to questions, Andrew and Mick, both of you, you're like, is this the time? And then sometimes I'm like, let me go ahead and ask the question so I can tell you. Let's have the discussion.
I agree.
We have to create that space, right, for other people to do it, because we're in a we're here. I guess, you know, we're feeling comfortable with who we are and ready to speak. But, you know, you're right. You know, absolutely, I'm the same. No, let me tell you, everyone who knows me, if you give me a minute, I'll take 10. But you know, that's part of what we should be doing as champions of this group.
So I guess to wrap up, mindful of time, we've talked about the roles that we can play as visible role models, and that bravery to step up and challenge when someone unintentionally says something maybe inappropriate or incorrect, and feeling brave enough to challenge. I guess if you flip that round, what are some of the simple actions that other people can take to be more inclusive to LGBTQ plus people? And I guess the first perfect example is, do not assume the gender of someone else's partner, and practice gender neutral questions. It's so funny when you start to listen to the questions that people ask. What are you getting your wife for Christmas? Who's cooking the dinner this evening, your girlfriend or you? And these are all things. I hate going to the hairdressers, just so you all know. I hate going to the hairdressers because I feel like you have that same conversation every single time and you have to kind of out yourself, and it gets frustrating. But the question is then, what can others do to create that safer space for LGBTQ plus people? Andrew, would you start us off?
Well, I would say I don't have that problem at the hairdressers, Russ, because there's really only one question that can be asked. So, yeah, I feel follically seen today. So, what would I think from the comment that you made around don't assume the gender of people's partners is a really simple way forward. I think respecting people's pronouns, or even taking time to know what people's pronouns are. And I think there's been a great leap forward, certainly over probably the last couple of years, around recognizing that not everyone is he, him, or her, she, and that. And that's a starting point. I think ask questions. Farren mentioned it earlier about educate yourself. I don't think I've ever not answered a question. If somebody's taken the time to ask me something about my life or my experiences, it's a way to learn. And I think we're all adults and we can learn when something's coming from a place of good intent and wanting to know more about what it means to be part of the LGBT plus community. I think when we do events, get involved, ask questions. Allyship isn't something about being at the front of the parade or what have you. It's about showing up, asking questions, providing support, being kind to one another. I don't have a grand answer there. I think it's just simple common decency towards your fellow human, and that's a great starting point. And if you don't know, ask.
That's a fantastic answer, thank you. Mick, any additional suggestions?
I think fairly much covered with that with Andrew. I think that the ally thing for me is also just knowledge that an ally, you know, is around. Like Andrew said, you don't have to be at the front of the parade, but it is around supporting. And also, I think what we talked around earlier around speaking up. You know, if employees are feeling like the conversation's going down a route, or there's language being used that they're not comfortable with, well, then it's probably not right. Their intuition is probably right. And actually, you can have a conversation about that, and it doesn't have to be a difficult conversation. It can be played back quite simply. I know within my team, I've got some some fantastic allies that have from everything from the decorations that we have in our Devonshire Square office is from our allies who said, Mick, I want to be behind this. I want to support you. What do you need? And that's really brilliant, because actually there's different roles that our allies can play in our lives. But the biggest thing for me is respect. You know, I know it's a very much a big pride slogan, but, you know, love is love, and we're all people, and we all deserve the right to live our lives in the way that we've chosen, with respect. So that's really what I'd like the allies to do, is to stand up for that, for those values, really.
Fantastic, thanks, Mick. And Farren, any other suggestions for how to be a great ally?
I agree with both Andrew and Mick. Ask questions, stand up, but also my ask is take the anxiety away that you're going to say or do something wrong. Like, it's always like I don't know, is that okay? Like, it's like, we're all going to make mistakes. I sometimes, say the wrong pronouns, then I correct myself. It is okay to make a mistake. That does not make you homophobic. It does not make you anything. And the fact that you actually care means that that means a lot. That helps with, like, your support means a lot, and the fact that you care. So just kind of taking a deep breath and asking the questions that you don't know. Like, it's fine to ask the questions like, hey, she, like, what pronouns, or, like, is this okay, or I heard this, or just, like you said, like we said, have all said, educating yourself, but letting that anxiety of, oh my gosh, I can't say this, oh my gosh, I can't do this, and just living life, and it'll help things run smoother. Like, the more you do something, the easier it gets. And so letting the anxiety go, and being okay with making a mistake, but just correcting that mistake. And like, oh, okay, I'm so sorry, I used the wrong pronouns, but I'm going to work on that. Or, I didn't use gender neutral questions. I'm going to work on that. And just moving forward, it's totally fine. It does not label you anything. It labels you human, because we're all going to make mistakes.
And can we all take a minute to recognise what an amazing ally Lizzo was recently? So last week released a song containing a ableist slur. She was called out by her listeners, by her fans. She didn't go, whoa, like, you're all crazy. She went, whoa, I made a mistake, I'm going to correct that. No fuss, new song released with no slurs in it. And I just think that's such an amazing example of taking accountability for your actions without getting defensive, and doing better, knowing better and doing better, right?
Exactly. I love
So
that.
to wrap up then, folks, I'm going to put you on the spot with one final closing question, and you're allowed one word and one word only. And to help you out, I'm going to ask the question, then I'm going to give my answer. So the question is, if you could sum up an emotion or a feeling for the future of the LGBTQ plus community, what would that one word be? And I think for me, that word is hopeful. And I'm going to turn to Andrew over in Australia to answer that question.
I would have said hopeful as well.
It's a good word.
Yeah, I just hope the progress that we've made continues, and that the experiences that we have all had, younger individuals or as we were growing up, are not repeated, and that, yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm going to stop it there. So
That's fab. Farren?
I really want to Google, like, another word, like a synonym for hopeful. So I'm like, I feel like it's gonna be all of our words, but it is so true. Like, I think that hopeful is the best word. I see the generation, my daughter's generation, she's 12, my godson's generation, they're a whole different breed, and they just know who they are, and they just stand in it, and they are not afraid to stand up and speak truth to power and say, like, hey, those aren't her pronouns, you should use her pronouns, or they use these pronouns. Like, they're just so powerful. So I'm going to still hopeful. I'm sorry. I wish I had a better vocabulary, guys. I'll Google it.
I feel guilty for stealing your thunder in advance. Mick, any advance on hopeful?
The only other word I could positive. I feel positive. You know, from where we've come, it's looking bright. That's where I am.
Good.
I quickly Googled another one, and the only other word that came up on the Google thesaurus was optimist or optimistic.
There you go.
So maybe we should re-record this segment, and one of us takes positive, one of us takes hopeful, and the other one takes optimistic.
Well, that would just feel completely inauthentic and ruin the amazing vibes that you guys have created on this wonderful conversation. So on that note, I'm going to wrap it up and say thank you so much to Andrew, Mick and Farren for being visible, for showing up today, for sharing their thoughts, sharing their stories. And I really hope everyone watching has found this fantastically insightful.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you all.
Guys.
Thank you very much.
That was an amazing panel. I want to thank all of our panelists, not just for taking part, but for their vulnerability and for their honesty. All three of you definitely inspired me, and I loved your stories about allyship at Impellam. I know that some people maybe had some video or audio issues, or were struggling to get into WebEx, so just remember that we will repost this on Workplace so that everybody can watch the whole thing. I want to thank our I'm Proud team in the US for all of the hard work that they've done to raise awareness during Pride Month, and specifically calling out Dia Richards, Esther Swati and Tracy Brewer, who've all done an outstanding job, as have our local ED&I teams in the UK and Australia. So, as Farren, Andrew and Mick said, things do look hopeful, they do look optimistic, and they do look positive, but I would like to add to that. Russell provided us with a really frightening statistic. There have been 240 anti-LGBTQ bills in the USA so far this year in 2022 alone. Please take time to consider how changes in your state and your region may impact your colleagues. Understand that they may be facing challenges, be empathetic and support them however you can. And let's not be complacent. As we saw this week, circumstances can change rapidly. And given the Supreme Court's comments revisiting gay marriage and same-sex relationships, there are likely to be challenges ahead. We still have work to do, and at Impellam, that work starts with all of us. So, as a CEO who also happens to be gay, and not a gay CEO to echo Russell's point, I recognise that I'm also in a position of privilege, and I intend to use that to continue to build a better Impellam for all of our LGBTQ plus community. And again, as Mick said, not just today, not for Pride Panel, and not just for Pride Month, for the entirety of my time here at Impellam. I didn't need to search for quotes. Farren gave me an amazing quote as part of that panel, and it's how I feel about continuing to play a progressive role in ED&I at Impellam. And so this is my turn to take a lap with the baton, or the baton again for my English colleagues. So let me say it loud and clear. All of our LGBTQIA plus colleagues and their allies are not just welcome here at Impellam. They're wanted, they're respected, and they're an integral part of our Impellam family. I take responsibility for ensuring that we protect that and that we continue to build upon the inclusive and progressive culture in our workplace. Our ED&I groups welcome everybody, and I hope that today we helped a few people to feel more comfortable about bringing their whole selves to work. And I hope that we encourage more of you to become active allies to our community. If you want to explore allyship or find support or become more involved in ED&I at Impellam, please reach out to your local ED&I groups on Workplace. I know Anne is bringing Unity to our UK and Asia Pac regions, and that's already in play. But you'll find all of the information you need on your local workplace groups. We did have Q&A, and I don't think we have a lot of time for Q&A. How many minutes do I have left, Anne?
We're right at the top of the hour.
So we're right at the top. Okay, so we've got some questions, so thank you everybody for submitting those. We'll respond to them on Workplace. And obviously please feel free to reach out to myself or Anne or any of our Unity colleagues if you have any additional questions. But thank you everyone for joining us.